Good afternoon, everyone. This is Heather from Sault College International Department. We are very lucky and happy this afternoon to be joined today by Elizabeth Long and Zia Sumar. They are both immigration lawyers from Long Mangoji Immigration Law Group. They have very generously offered to host this webinar for us this afternoon. And so welcome Elizabeth and Zia, and thank you very much for your time, and I'll pass it to you.
Thank you so much, Heather. It's fantastic to be here today. So Zia and I are joining you guys from Toronto, but you know, the way things are, it doesn't matter where we are because we can all meet together on Zoom. So that's fantastic. Well, today I'm going to, first of all, talk about how to make sure you guys maintain your status as you're studying and on your study permits. Then we're going to be talking about how to apply for your postgrad work permit. And then afterwards, we're going to be talking about how you guys can qualify for permanent residence. Before we talk about, all the way about permanent residence, there's a couple of concepts I'd like to talk with you guys about and make sure you guys understand. The first one that is very important is called implied status. So if you have temporary status, like a study permit, a work permit, or visitor status, there's going to be an end to your status. On your study permit, it'll have a date that says valid to, okay? And if you need to extend your status in Canada, as long as you apply before that date, you can continue to stay in Canada. And if you have a study permit and you're applying to extend your study status, you can continue to study in Canada until a decision is made. That is called implied status. So on the government website, it says 30 days you have to apply to extend your status. That is a recommendation, but the law is as long as you file the application, even the day of. I don't recommend it. I recommend that you give yourself some time just in case the system goes down or you don't have some documents. But even if you file it before it, as long as you file it before it expires, you carry on, you stretch out your time, you can continue to study in Canada using what's called implied status until a decision is made. During COVID times, this can be very important because the processing times can be stretched because the officers may not, there may not be that many people working in the offices. And so as long as you applied before, you can continue on with your status. Now, what if you forget, right? So what if my study permit expires on April 30th? If I applied April 29th and the decision is not made until July 30th, I can continue to stay in Canada, I can continue to study until a decision is made in July 30th. But if I forget on May 1st, what can I do? On May 1st, if I have not applied to extend my study permit status, then I don't have status at that point. Now you do have a second opportunity to write your case. You don't really have a third opportunity, okay? The second opportunity is I can apply for restoration of status within 90 days of losing my status. So I don't have to leave. I can apply. I can wait for a decision to be made. But the problem with that is because I have lost my status on May 1st, if I apply and I don't get a decision until July 30th, then I cannot study, I cannot work until I get my new study permit. So that difference between one day, between maybe a few hours, okay, is the difference between you being able to continue to study, to continue to work based on your student status, and you not being able to do so. So make sure the first thing that you do, you circle that date when your status ends and make sure you apply to extend your status before. Okay. The second thing is make sure when we talk about permanent residence, you will see that there's a big difference in work experience that's considered high skilled and work experience that is low skilled. There are only a few categories, specific occupations, where you might be able to get permanent residence with a low skilled position. Most of the permanent residence applications require high skilled positions. Okay, so what's high skilled? What's low skilled? Well, immigration has used a classification system called the National Occupation Classification Codes, the NOC codes. O, A, and B, and they're divided into 5 categories. O, A, and B are high skilled, and C and D are low skilled. Okay, so what's high skilled? What's low skilled? Let's play a little game. I'm gonna say a occupation, and you think, no, you can't respond to me, but maybe you can see whether or not you think you know that it's high skilled or low skilled. Okay, so let's take an office situation. A receptionist, that's low skilled. Secretary, high skilled. Data entry clerk, low skilled. Let's talk about a medical assistant, that's high skilled. A dental assistant, that's low skilled. Bookkeeper, that's high skilled. Accounting clerk, that's low skilled. Okay, I don't know how many of you guys got all of this. I highly doubt that all of you got all of it, okay? But my point that I'm trying to make is that you can't just assume that the work that you're going to be doing or the work that you have done is high skilled or low skilled. Always go into the NOC codes and check to make sure what code you are doing, okay? And we'll build on these this knowledge when we talk about high skilled and low skilled work in permanent residence. Now, let's talk about what you can do while you are on a study permit. So first of all, the law is you have to actively pursue studies when you are on a study permit. And if you don't, you will lose your status within 90 days, whether or not your study permit expires. Okay? So what does actively pursue studies mean? Actively pursue studies means you're attending classes, except in 2 specific cases. One is the scheduled breaks by the school. Okay, so what is a scheduled break? Well, if it's on the academic calendar, so if it's part of your program that, for example, you get a summer semester off, that's a scheduled break. Okay, are COVID time scheduled breaks? That remains to be seen. Right now, we would suggest that you not treat let's say you're, it remains to be seen whether or not you can work full-time or not. We have had some indication that if it is something where you get it, some classes delayed, you may be able to work full-time, but we haven't had actual anything stated on the immigration site. So to be safe, it probably would be best if you are working part-time, if it is because of COVID. The other possible reason would be called an authorized leave. This is when, for example, you need to stop classes because of a medical reason. You'll need to get special permission from the school. You can't just say, oh, I want to take a leave. You have to get special permission from the school, and you can get these authorized leaves for 150 days. But when you are on authorized leave, you cannot work at all. You can't work full-time, you can't work part-time, okay? And if it's over 150 days, then you will have to file an extension of your status. So we have gotten a lot of questions as to what happens because of COVID. Can I not file any extensions? My status is going to end. What should I do? Okay, so first of all, you have to file extensions of your status. Okay, if just like I had stated in the beginning with implied status, that is still the case. That is always going to be the case. Okay, so unless immigration somehow cannot accept applications anymore, but that's another story. They are accepting applications online, so you must file the extension of your study permit. So, for example, if your study permit is going to expire before your program ends, because the program is extended, file an extension of your study permit. And then once your program ends, then you can apply for your postgrad work permit. Even if it's a few days, file the extension for your study permit, okay? To file an extension of your status, you need to show that you are still, for your student permits, you need to show that you're still going to attend classes, so you're still a registered student, finances, forms, etc. And you need to, and we'll talk about postgrad work permits afterwards, but make sure you prepare your applications early. Don't just, on the day of panic because, oh no, the school is closed, I don't have these documents, etc. Make sure you're getting these documents well ahead of time, okay? As long as you have submitted your application properly, you have implied status. Properly means you've submitted the right forms and you have submitted the right fees. If you don't submit the right fees, if you don't submit the right forms, it's as if you have not submitted your application at all. So make sure that is correct, okay? Now, while you are studying, you can work if you are a full-time student, except in the last semester. Now, we have gotten some indication from immigration that if you are part-time because of COVID, that they're still okay. It's, they're giving some leeway to this. The best thing to do would be if you don't, but if you can't, there's some indication from them, they're giving some leeway for that. Now, here's the thing. When you complete your studies though, you are no longer a student. That is something that I get questions on a lot by students. Well, I've completed my studies. I can work full-time now, right? No, it's not a scheduled break. If you have completed your studies, you're no longer a full-time student. You have to stop working full-time, part-time, anytime, okay? The only time is if you have completed your studies and you are going to start another program, and the second program is less than 150 days. If that's the case, then you can work in between that time. So if one semester is there, you can work in between that time. What happens though if that was your plan, but the program is deferred because of COVID? Another good question. That question, we've asked, I've sent a question to immigration, have not heard back from them whether they're giving any leeway for students. In the meantime, to be on the conservative side, we would recommend that if you're planning to start a program in May and you had stopped studying and you finish your program in December, and your May program is deferred until September, that what you should do is file an extension of your study permit. Because remember, your study status, irregardless of when your study permit expires, your study status expires 90 days after you stop studying, unless there's 150 days in between the programs, okay? 150 days is kind of like an authorized leave almost, okay? So like I said, right now, our recommendation is you still work part-time during COVID time, unless it's a scheduled break, okay, until a policy is clearly announced by IRCC on their website, allowing for full-time. Post-grad work permit. This is going to be also an interesting question during COVID times, but normally what happens is, let's first talk about whether or not you should apply for a post-grad. You only get one of these post-grad work permits. They are golden tickets. You only get one golden ticket in your lifetime. The reason why I'm saying that they're a golden ticket is because they are very easy to get, okay? Normally, if you were to apply for a work permit, you would need the employer to apply for LMIA, where they would have to advertise and show they can't find a Canadian with the skills to do the job. Most employers would not be willing to do that. With a post-grad work permit, once you graduate, and if you have, you meet the proper circumstances, you submit the right application and documents, you will get your post-grad work permit just like that. Well, you only get that once in your lifetime, okay? It's also very good because it's an open work permit. You can just work for anyone you like. So you can find a job quite easily with that, okay? So the length of your post-grad work permit coincides with the length of your program. If you have a 2-year program or more, you get a 3-year work permit. Less than 2 years, you're supposed to get a work permit based on how long your program was for, between 8 months and 2 years, okay? So sometimes the academic years are shorter than the calendar years. So it depends on, letters from the school and your transcripts on whether or not you can prove that the length of your program is actually a 2 academic year program or not, okay? If you only have a 1-year program, and some people, they can get their PR with 1 year of work experience or a 1-year work permit, but sometimes people can't even find a job for maybe a few months. And if they only have a 1-year work permit and they need that 1 year of work experience in Canada, that can get very dicey. So what you may consider doing is doing another 1-year program. If you've done a 1-year program and you do another 1-year program, you can add these programs together to equal to 2 years and get your 3-year work permit. In order to qualify for the postgrad work permit, you must have maintained full-time status at school during every semester of the program. Now, during COVID times, the government has announced that they will give an exception if it's, if the program is less because of COVID, okay? Distance education normally would disqualify you if the total amount is over 50%, but again, exceptions may be made for online courses due to COVID, okay? You can work full-time as soon as you apply for your postgrad work permit, but only within certain parameters. You have to apply when your study permit is valid, and if it's within 90 days of the completion of your program, whichever comes first. Why do I say 90 days? Because the website says 180 days. You have 180 days to apply for your postgrad work permit. But the problem is you have to have proper status, and you have to have proper study permit status in order to work full-time, okay? And you lose your study permit status when your study permit expires or 90 days upon the completion of your program. That is why I put this rule in there, and this is what you should remember. Apply before your study permit expires or within 90 days of the completion of your program, whichever comes first. If you do so, you can work full-time. Why is this important? Again, because during COVID times, you can't go to the border anymore to apply for your work permit. So you're left with applying online. Who knows how long these work permits are going to take to be processed? Before COVID, it was taking 3 to 4 months. During COVID, 5, 6, 7 months. You want to be able to work during that time. Okay, so keep this rule in mind. Now, so when you do apply for your work permit, you have to make sure the completion of program is there. The completion of your program is not when you get your degree, when you convocate. Completion of your program is the first notice that you get that you have completed your program. Your transcript, a letter from the school, and you can apply once you have your transcript and the letter from the school, okay, to show that you've completed your program. And so make sure you submit your application properly, pay your fees, submit the right forms, and then you can start working. All right, let's move on to permanent residence. I'm going to be talking about a few different ways to apply for permanent residence. The first one I like to talk about is the most common one, called express entry. So how express entry works is, first, you have to create an online profile. You create an online profile if you qualify under one of 3 categories: skilled worker class, Canadian experience class, skilled trades class. And then if you qualify, you can get into the express entry pool. But just because you get into the pool, it doesn't mean that you have applied. You can't apply. So once you're in the pool, you get a series of points based on your background called the CRS points. And it's based on the background and also if you have provincial nominee certification, okay? And if you, and every 2 weeks or so, the government will announce a draw. And when they announce a draw, they'll announce a number. If your CRS points number is above that number, then finally you get an invitation to apply and you can actually apply. If your number is not above that number, then you have to stay in the pool. So the trick is not just to get into the pool, it's also to get out of the pool. All right, so let's first talk about how to get in the pool. The first category I'm going to talk about is the federal skilled worker class. This is something that many of you may already qualify for. And actually, I have a lot of people who have actually never been in Canada who also qualify for this. In order to qualify for this, the work experience you have to have is 1 year of high skill, full-time, continuous work experience in one occupation. So let's break that down. 1 year of high skilled, we talk about what high skilled is, not O, A, and B. Full-time, full-time is equivalent to 30 hours a week. You can add part-time hours together. For example, if I worked 15 hours a week for 2 years, I can add that together to equal to 1,560 hours, 52 times 30, okay? And that's okay. But I can't do 60 hours a week and do only 6 months, okay? At least 1 year and at least 1,560 hours. Then you need continuity. So if I did 4 months of co-op, 4 months of school, that's not continuous. That won't count. Okay? It has to be in one occupation. If I was a nurse and I worked in the hospital for 6 months and then I became a doctor and I worked in the same hospital for 6 months, can I do that? No, it's not in the same occupation. If I was a nurse and worked for 6 months in one hospital and then transferred to working as a nurse in another hospital, can I do that? Yes. Okay, I didn't say it has to be the same employer. I said it has to be the same occupation. I also didn't say that it has to be work experience in Canada. Okay, like I said, people qualify even if they're not in Canada. It does not have to be work experience when you're not a student. This is not the Canadian experience class. This is work experience for the federal skilled worker. So we have a lot of people, for example, who get their work experience while they're in school, okay, and they can qualify for this. So that's work experience. You can also be self-employed for this. Now, after this, then you have to pass a language. Now, I can give you the language requirement for this, but I'm going to say language also counts later on down the road, and it's going to be a higher level of language likely that you'll need to get the points to get out. But the language to get in is at least a 6.0 in each of the categories for your IELTS score, reading, writing, listening, and speaking, or 7 for CELPIP. Then they look at the other circumstances of your case. We add it together to equal to at least 67 points for the skilled worker points section. You also need to have financial savings as well. Okay, so if you have all that, you might just very well qualify to get into the pool, just to get into the pool, not necessarily to get out of the pool. Okay. The second one I'd like to talk to you guys about is the Canadian Experience class. So in order to qualify for this one, the work experience is very different from the skilled worker class. The work experience for the Canadian Experience class is work experience that you gain while you are not a full-time student. That is legal, okay? And it is high-skilled, and you are employed in Canada. So it does not have to be in one occupation, okay? It does not have to be continuous, but it's work experience that you would have gained when you're not a student, when you're not a full-time student, and it's work experience that you've gained when you are employed as well. So you have to make sure you get a T4. Okay, you also have to pass your language results as well. And again, these language results, they're very similar to the skilled worker one. There might be enough for you to get in, but you probably will need more to get out. The skilled trades is another thing. So if you guys are in the construction trades, or you guys are in the cooks or chefs, you could qualify under this. The only thing is that you need to either get a LMIA from the employer or you need certification. Now, what's the difference between the three? Does it matter which one you qualify for? So prior to COVID, it didn't really matter that much which one you qualified for. Normally, they had a draw for all of the categories. For skilled trades, they used to have a couple of lower scores just for skilled trades. But other than that, it didn't make too much of a difference. Recently, however, we have had 2 draws since COVID, since we went into lockdown for COVID. And the 2 draws, interestingly, have all been for the Canadian Experience class. I think the government feels like, for the skilled worker ones, which are mostly for people from overseas, they're not going to be able to travel to Canada. But for people who are in Canada, it's really important that they be allowed to stay in Canada. And so the points, when they've been drawn only for the Canadian Experience class, the nice thing is that the points for this have been going down a little bit each time. So how do they work? So basically, you have to have your score, and every 2 weeks, the government has a draw, okay? So if the last score was 467, who gets through? Well, you might say Troop T can get through. But wait a minute. The last draw was only for people under the Canadian Experience class. Does Troop T have at least 1 year of work experience in Canada to qualify under Canadian Experience class when she's not a full-time student? If she does, then yes, she'll get an invitation to apply. If she doesn't, then she wouldn't get an invitation to apply. Okay, so if you can imagine that we have hundreds of thousands of bubbles like this in Express Entry, and the government wants to invite normally around 3,000 to 4,000 people on every 2 weeks, every 2 draws. That's why the numbers have been going up quite a lot in the past couple of years, because Canada has become a very popular destination for a lot of people. We kind of call it the Trump effect, okay? Recently, if you have Canadian experience and you have done your IELTS, then there might be an advantage, because people from overseas, the foreign skilled workers, won't qualify, and a lot of people may not have done their IELTS, and now they can't because a lot of centers are closed. So the points may very well be going down for the Canadian Experience class during COVID times. So how do you get points under the CRS system? Well, first of all, age. I like to say, when it is your 30th birthday, it is no longer a happy birthday. Okay, when you are in your 30s, your points go down 5 or 6 points. And by the time you get to your 40s, it goes a fast slide down 10, 11 points until you get to your 45th birthday. When is your 45th birthday? The good news is your points don't go down anymore. The bad news is it's 0. Okay, not a lot we can do about age except apply as early as possible. Education is also very important. If you have 2 degrees or more, and one of them is at least a 3-year degree, then your points jump to another level. So if you have your language I find is one of the most important dividing factors. A lot of times, especially if you don't have 1 year of work experience in Canada, we're looking at English results of 7s in reading, writing, and speaking, and an 8 in listening, or CELPIP results of 9 in each category. If you do have 1 or 2 years of work experience in Canada, that might be lowered slightly, especially if the points go down. Before the 470s, we're still looking at, higher, like those high levels. As they go down to 460s, maybe 450s, it might be going down a little bit. Canadian work experience. This is the work experience that is the same as a Canadian experience class. So the work experience that you gain when you're not a full-time student, and when you are the work experience that's legal. Okay, so make sure you apply. Remember what I said about the post-grad work permit. Apply at the right time for your post-grad work permit. Okay, if your study permit is expiring before then, file the extension of your study permit, okay, just so that you can apply while you still have study permit status, even if you're on implied status, okay? Foreign work experience, you can gain possible up to 50 points for foreign work experience, so that can be very important. Spouse, oftentimes, if you are a single person, you might gain a little bit more than if you are married or common law. But if you have a super spouse, who has a higher level of education, they have very good English or French skills, Canadian work experience, then you might gain some more points with them. provincial nominee program, we're going to talk about that. It's not any nomination under provincial nominee program. It has to be express entry based provincial nominee programs that will qualify you. Previous study in Canada. At Sault College, you guys are great. You will get normally 15 points for 1 to 2 years or 30 points for 3 years a program. Arranged employment. Now, this is only for those people who have employer-specific work permits or LMIAs. So just based on your postgrad work permit, you're not going to be eligible for this. If you have siblings or Canadians or permanent residents, you get 15 points. The ability to speak fluent French can be very, very important. Okay, if you can speak fluent French, you can qualify for a lot more points for this, and there are a lot of other programs that you might qualify for as well. Trade certification. This is for people who are in the trades. This is where you can get things like the Red Seal certification for carpentry or for cooks or chefs, etc. Okay. So if you look at that and your points are great, that's fantastic. If you look at that and your points are so-so, well, there's a few ways that you can add to those points. You can add 600 points to those points, which guarantees you to get an invitation to apply. But only if you can get into one of the express entry streams for provincial nominee programs. So I'm going to be talking about the Ontario Provincial Nominee Program. In Ontario, you can't just apply straight to the government for these programs. They have to pick you. You can't pick them, they have to pick you. After they pick you, you have a choice whether or not you want to apply with them or not, okay? But they have to make the first move. So what happens is first you have to be in the pool for them to see you. So you have to first create an entry in the express entry pool. And then when they see you in there, they might send you an expression of interest. So who are they interested in? Well, there's a few categories. The first one, called the human capital stream, we're not sure, they don't themselves know exactly who they like. They have stated that there is one category called the tech draws, where they have stated a specific number of occupations in the tech sector that they are interested in. They still go by a certain number for your CRS points. I think it went to 430s, 450s, etc. And then still lower than the federal draws. And if they have experience in one of the tech occupations, they might invite these people to apply for 600 more points. There are other things that they have done before. They have had a list of other occupations that they thought there was a need for. There was other things where if you had a job offer in Ontario, they would have invited you to apply for them. In order to qualify for this, though, you must have a bachelor's degree. If you have a bachelor's degree from outside of Canada, that's all right, but you have to have a bachelor's degree from somewhere. Skilled trades. This is a very good one as well. So this one, they may be interested in you if you have at least 1 year of work experience in one of the specified trades. You can be a baker, you can be in one of the construction trades, not the lower skilled one, but the higher skilled one. You can be a chef, unfortunately not a cook, okay? But if you have 1 year of work experience, one of the specified trades in the last 2 years, you can, they can invite you to apply with them for 600 more points. And it's usually, they'll invite someone with a much lower CRS score as well. If you are French speaking, you could also receive an expression of interest. You have to have a bachelor's degree or higher for that one. And you have to have a CLB level of 7 in French, which is similar to a level 6 in IELTS in English, okay? So after all of this express entry, I don't know about you, but sometimes I get tired of express entry, especially for some of my clients who may not ever be able to get through express entry. Well, I have some other options for you guys. These other options, though, are mostly going to be employer job offer specific, okay? So here are some programs under the Provincial Nominee Program, which are employer-based. First of all, the employer has to qualify. If they're inside Toronto, the gross income has to be over $1 million, have 5 full-time Canadian employees or permanent resident employees in that location where you're working, and be in business for 3 years. Outside of the GTA, so of course Sault Ste. Marie is outside of the GTA, and you know you're lucky because then the employer can be much smaller. Gross income of 500,000, 3 full-time Canadian permanent resident employees, and be in business for 3 years. Now the job offer has to be full-time and permanent, okay? There are 3 categories under the employer-based ones. The first one, the international student one, is great. So you have to apply within 2 years of graduation. The job offer has to be high skilled. The salary just needs to meet entry level wage for the occupation, which most of the time I have not experienced any issues with that. You have to have graduated with a 2-year program or a 1-year postgraduate program, okay, at a public university or college in Canada. So if you do that, and you have that job offer, and the employer is willing to help you, then you can qualify for this category. Now, fantastic, right? I never said anything about language, never said anything about age, you know, education. There's, you know, you have to graduate from the program, but other than that, this is the criteria. Now, the problem is that, of course, there's always a problem. Nothing is easy these days about immigration, okay? There's always sometimes some issues. There is an issue with this one. It used to be that it's open all the time, but because express entry the points have been so high, a lot of people have had to rely on this program. And last year it was open from February to May, and then it was closed. This year when it was opened, so many people applied that it closed within a few minutes. Okay, so whether or not it's going to reopen this year remains to be seen. But that is one of the issues with this program. There's another program that if you have 2 years of work experience in the last 5 years, anywhere in the world, it could be, you know, outside of Canada, but it has to be in that occupation, and the salary has to meet median wage, okay? Then you can also qualify for this category. And then there's a third one called in demand. Now, in demand is the only one, well, other than the caregiver one, which I'll talk about. RNIP may have a few occupations in there as well. But in demand for the provincial nominee program is the only one that is low skilled. So in order to qualify for this category, you have to be one of the listed occupations. Some of the listed occupations can be nurses' aides. If you're working at truck drivers, construction laborers, farm workers, etc. Okay, and I think they're talking about adding sewing machine operators. If you have 9 months of work experience in Ontario in this occupation, and then you can qualify for this category, okay, because you would have had, all of you would have had your high school degree, and you do have to have a English exam, but it's really, really low. It's at the 4 level, and all of you would qualify for that, okay? All right, so let's talk about the RNIP. The RNIP is another program that you guys are lucky enough that you could qualify for it, because the Sioux is one of those few cities that actually qualify for this. So first of all, you have to have recommendation from a participating community. Okay. In order to qualify, you have to have 1 year of work experience, or if you don't have the 1 year of work experience, they have to graduate from an eligible program of 2 years in the program. So this doesn't make a lot of sense. The study program has to be at least 2 years. You have to apply within 18 months of graduation as well, okay? You have to at least be a full-time student. If you're a master's or PhD, it could be less than 2 years, okay? Also, for the Sioux, you need to have a qualifying job offer in the community, and you have to score at least 70 points on the community requirements, okay? So the Sioux has an occupations list. If you're not on the occupations list, your chances are slim that you'll get nominated. If you are on the occupations list, your job is full-time, non-seasonal, and it meets the entry-level wage, then you may have a chance to get nominated on this. You have to score at least 70 points on the community requirements as well. Okay, but you need that job offer, very much job offer related, okay, if it's not express entry. You have to meet the language benchmark. That should be much, much easier for you guys to do, and much lower than express entry. It depends on which occupation it is for the benchmark, but most of you should have no problem meeting that. Okay. You have to have work in Canada and or you have savings as well. The other program, a lot of you who are in the PSW or even ECE, or maybe you have a spouse who is working in Canada right now. This is the Caregiver program is something that you should think about. So first of all, to qualify, you need 24 months of full-time work experience in Canada, taking care of someone who is a child, an elderly person, or disabled person in their home. You don't have to live with them. You just have to go during the day to take care of them in their home. You have to at least have a 1 year post-secondary education. All of you should have that. Meet the language benchmark of 5. Okay, so that's it. So this is something you'll need to get. The work experience is after you get your post-grad work permit, after you graduate. But this is something that you should think about doing, especially right now. There's a lot of people who will need this work, and it's a very easy, compared to some of the other programs, to qualify for permanent residence. All right, so I don't know about you, whether or not your head is spinning or not, but I do know that this is a very complicated process. It just gets more and more complicated. It seems like every seminar I do, I do quite a few of these every year, and it seems like every year, and even last week I did another seminar for another school, and this year more things have changed. What should you do for yourself? The first one is you got to have a plan with immigration. Even if plans later on change, have a plan as early as possible. Don't say, oh, I'll wait until I graduate to have a plan. No, you have to have a plan before you graduate so you'll know what to do when you graduate, okay? You need to have a plan to get to your immigration goals. And it's not just a plan. Normally, when someone comes to us for a consultation, we have a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C, okay? As many plans as we need in order for someone to, make different turns in the path in case things change. Once you have that plan, you need to make sure that you're ready to do what you need to do to get there. study, take the practice exams for IELTS, CELPIP, French exams, TEF, TCF. I think that's the new French one. Make sure you have the study programs that you need. Make sure that you can get that work permit for the length of time that you need to get your Canadian work experience. Again, that all goes back to the goals. Once you have your goals, I know you guys are here. You guys are very, very special people. To be able to leave, your home and everyone and come over here, you have already made a very big step. And I know that you guys have what it takes to do what you need to do. Okay, so don't give up, but just make sure you know what you need to do to get there. Make sure that you stay in status. If you are not in status, this is where when people come to us, if they did not stay in status, my heart just drops, because this is when you can get yourself into the most trouble, when you can get off the path. Okay, immigration, do not assume that they have compassion, because I can tell you that most of the time they do not. Okay, so don't think that, I'll just do this, I don't feel like it, or they'll understand. No, they don't understand anything. Okay, make sure you stay in status. Make sure you file what you need to do. If your application is rejected, you have to contact a lawyer right away. There are filing deadlines for the courts. Okay, the filing deadline is 15 days from the date of rejection. Now, during COVID times, there may be some leeway because the courts are closed, but there are still filing deadlines. So make sure that you contact a lawyer right away. Okay. If you call the call center, the call center says, "Oh, just write immigration a letter." Okay. People do that all the time. They call the call center. They say, "Oh, write immigration a letter." They write immigration a letter, and then they don't really know what to write, and they get their application rejected again. Okay. That's called a reconsideration. Now, if they do that, they come to me, and I say, okay, I can write to immigration. Oftentimes, immigration will not consider my request because it's a second attempt at a reconsideration. Okay, they say this person already had a kick at the can. They're not going to get a second kick. Okay, so contact a lawyer if you have a rejection right away. Don't just try to fix it yourself. The more you try to fix it, the worse it can get. Also, you need to know your timelines for restoration of status. If your application is rejected, if you had filed implied status before your application is rejected, it's 90 days from the date of rejection. If you did not apply properly, then it could be 90 days from the date when your status had ended in the beginning. Okay, so make sure you know what the restoration of status periods are and that you apply properly. Okay, so that's all we have for today for my presentation. Here are our contact information. Please do feel free to contact us. We do offer discounts for people who come to our seminars, so let us know you've come to our seminar for consultations. We have a special COVID update page where we have some updates due to COVID there. Check that out. And on our social media, we post a lot of updates for immigration on social media as well. So let's do a little question and answer period. Zia and Heather, are you guys there?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so I think we've had quite a few questions and answers, and I know people have been emailing us before. Heather, do you have a couple of questions you wanted to ask?
Yes, please. So a common one we get, and I know we've received a few questions like this week, is if someone's study permit is going to expire early, say the end of April or in early May, with the current timeline, it's before they can get proof of completion if their course was meant to end at the end of April. So what would you suggest these people do in order to try to remain in status and to be able to keep working while they're waiting, or once they've applied for their postgrad work permit?
Right, so very important, apply early before your study permit expires to get that implied status. Don't assume that immigration is going to be okay with just a few days. No, they're not okay with anything. With few days, no. Apply. If you can't get your completion letter before that time, apply before so that you can get your implied status there. Okay. In terms of working, normally we would suggest that you apply within that time period, the 90 days, or when your study permit expires so that you can work full time.
Thank you. And then for students, most students have shifted all of their classes to online right now, as much as possible to complete the semester. There are some classes which are not available online. So we have some students who are potentially unable to complete a placement, others whose entire program, an example might be aircraft structural repair. I believe most of those courses, from what we've heard from the students, are not available online. And so what would you recommend for them? And this is directly related then to the COVID-19 response.
Okay, so basically, if you your classes are shifted to the next semester, is that the case? So basically, there's classes who are supposed to start in May, and then they can't attend classes anymore?
Some students were meant to be in the classes, so halfway through the semester.
Okay.
There are some aspects of certain courses, especially if it's very practical and hands-on, that might not be available online.
Okay, so first of all, with regard to the postgrad work permits, a lot of these kind of situations, you probably will get an exemption if it's part-time. Normally, if it's part-time, you're not supposed to get a postgrad work permit unless it's last semester. But during these COVID times, I think that might be excused, and the government will probably give you an ability to get a postgrad even if it's part-time sometimes during the school year. As for working, that is something that is, I would still suggest, because we haven't had a clear response from immigration whether you can work full-time during these times when it's part-time. I'm still advising you guys to be safe, just to work part-time. Because the full-time work, I don't know, Heather, have you received anything from immigration? Because I haven't seen anything yet that is definitive.
No, the only thing I have seen was kind of a tweet or a response to an email from a larger group that just said you'd have to work per the conditions on your permit. So if you were currently allowed to work part-time, you could work part-time.
Yeah. So, given the situation, be safe. Just to be safe, work part-time until we get indications from immigration that you can work full-time. Okay. Okay. All right, great. Yeah. Oh, sorry, you have.
No, go ahead. I just had one more clarification that came up because it's something I hear a lot as well around the rural and northern immigration pilot. So for international students to qualify for the work exemption, there are two questions I find a lot. One is, does taking what's known as a 1+1 qualify? Because the criteria does say that the program should be 2 years. And then the second part of that is it says study in the community. So we do have some students who study at other campuses, not in Sault Ste. Marie. So if we can just clarify if they would qualify.
Right. So the 1+1 is interesting. The program does say 2. I've heard some rumors that are saying the 1+1 may qualify, but on the website right now, it still says 2. To be safe, I would say still just do the 2 or else have the work experience first. Once we have some more clarification on that, we'll certainly send that out for that information. As for studying in the community, I think that's pretty important. You do have to study within the community in order to qualify for that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Leah, do you have any?
Yes, so we've gotten some great questions. Right now, with everything that's happening with COVID, if an individual submits their extension application, they're getting requests for biometrics. But with all the centers being closed, what are we supposed to do? So what are applicants supposed to do?
Right. So there's a difference between applying and waiting. Okay. Apply, definitely apply. Even if you don't have all your documents, even if you don't have certain things, apply. Once you've applied, you've kept your status going. Okay. Immigration right now is giving a lot of leeway for people to get biometrics and medicals and police certificates and other documents because they understand that you may not be able to get them right away. And they are automatically giving extensions for biometrics and medicals and police certificates. And possibly for other documents. You have to state why you can't get them, and they'll probably give you leeway. In any case, given the current processing times, the officer probably won't even get your application until a few months later. Okay, so even let's say you don't have all the available documents, apply, put in the forms, put in the fees, right? Submit your application online so you have proof that you submitted. Later on, when you get those documents, you can always update your application.
Perfect. And what about individuals who have already gotten their postgraduate work permit? So I know you mentioned that it's a once in a lifetime and it's your golden ticket, but if someone's already gotten it and maybe they started working or maybe they weren't able to find a job, but with this with the COVID situation, they've been laid off, and so now time is passing on that postgraduate work permit. Is there going to be, do you know of any policy for recapturing that time or extending that postgraduate work permit, or what would you advise someone to do?
That's very interesting. The government has not said anything about giving leeway for extending postgrad work permits, etc. So whether or not you can extend it, I highly doubt that you're going to get an extension. In these kind of cases, it's really befitting for you to have a plan B, a plan C as to what to do in case you can't get back to work. Okay, everybody has their own circumstances, so I can't really say, you know, this is what you should do. There are different ways to get permanent residence as well. So certainly you should have a plan.
Okay, great. Moving away from the COVID, talking more generally about requirements for the postgraduate work permit, how do we, or what does a person need to look at when they're trying to combine programs to get that that longer postgraduate work permit?
So you have to do the second, and both of these programs have to be in a public college or university like Sault College, okay? Not private, okay? Both of these programs, the second program, if you complete the second 1 year within 2 years of completing the first 1 year program, then you're good. You can add the two programs together.
What about, so how are programs that are 8 months in length, how are they considered?
So 8 months in length is interesting. 8 months in length can be equal to 1 academic year sometimes, depending on the interpretation, okay? So it's very important that, so Heather, you guys give out letters, right, of completion which state whether or not a program is 1 academic year or not?
Yes, so the transcripts will usually show the exact dates. But generally an 8-month program is considered to be 1 academic year. So if we have a completion letter, we would say that this is a 1 year, or if someone has studied 2 different 1-year programs with us, we will say the student was studying with us for 2 years.
Yes, that's great, because as you know, immigration also understands that an academic year is not necessarily equal to a calendar year.
Okay, great. Elizabeth, can you go over when an individual can work on the study permit at the end of their program? So I guess the period where they've finished their last exam but haven't received confirmation, when they have received confirmation, when can they work, how many hours can they work? Can you go over that again?
Sure. Okay, so let's start from when you're doing your exams. When you're doing your exams, you're a full-time student, you can work part-time. When you finish your exams, I'd say you can work part-time until you get the first indication that you've passed your exams, you've completed your program. Whether you get your transcripts, or you get a email from the school, a letter from the school, etc. At that point, you cannot work anymore. Full-time, part-time, anytime. don't work, okay? You can work again full-time if you have applied for your post-grad work permit. You can apply for the post-grad work permit once you get that letter from the school and you have your transcripts, okay? Now, apply for the post-grad work permit. Remember to work, apply within 90 days of the completion or when your study permit expires, whichever comes first. Then you can start working full-time. You can start working full-time even if you don't have the work permit in hand. This is very important, especially for those people who may only have a 1-year work permit. If you apply, you can work until you get a work permit. So if it takes 6 months, if it takes 7 months, you've just bought yourself 6 or 7 months of work experience that you can use for permanent residence, okay? Because the officer will usually issue the work permit for 1 year at the time when they get to your application. So when they get to your application 7 months down the road, they'll issue it for 1 year, but you would have been able to work for 7 months. But you have to do it under those specific conditions.
Okay, great. And what if, so instead of stopping studying, I want to continue and do a second program, how does that change when I can and cannot work?
So if your second program is within starting, you get accepted to the second program and you completed your first program, it's within 150 days, you can work full-time, okay? That's a special exception for students. Now, what happens if you're going to do that, but your second program is now delayed because and deferred until September? Good question. Asked immigration, haven't heard back from them yet. For now, my advice to you is act as if it's normal times. File the extension for your study permit because your study permit will expire, the 150 days. So I would say file an extension for your study permit saying that my program is going to now be deferred until September and you need to stop working after 150 days.
Perfect. Thank you, Elizabeth. That's those are the most frequently asked questions that we've received.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, guys, so thank you guys so much for attending. I hope you guys have found this helpful and stay safe, guys. Stay healthy. Thanks, guys. Take care.